Hey guys, what is up? This is Matthew Davis, me once again. If you know me, then you know that there are two things that I love the most. Video games and horror. And Capcom did this in 1996 when they combined the two together to give us Resident Evil, one of the biggest horror franchises in video game history. And when you think horror video games, you easily think of Resident Evil, or maybe Silent Hill, though Silent Hill isn't growing as strong today. Though they have announced a new game that might not come out for a few years, but hey, Resident Evil is still going strong with the 8th game releasing this Friday, and I cannot wait to play that. So in preparation, I am going to be talking about my top 10 favorite Resident Evil games. I've been wanting to make this list for a really long time, and now I think it's the perfect time to make that list. These are the 10 games that I played the most. Well, some of them I haven't played a lot of, but I haven't played every single Resident Evil game. I haven't played Resident Evil 0 or the Dark Side Chronicles, or Revelations 2. I also do have a couple of honorable mentions of games that I have played, which include the Umbrella Chronicles for the Wii. This is actually a really fun rail shooter zombie game. Even though it's not fully canon to the Resident Evil universe, it's still pretty solid. And Resident Evil 5, it's much better to play this cooperatively. That's why, and also it's the game that made the series go downhill a little bit. But me and my sister have been playing cooperatively, and we're having fun. Though the boulder, Chris Redfield punching boulder thing, yeah, it's stupid. Like, there was a lot of stupid moments in Resident Evil, but hey, there are still a lot of awesome moments in the series as well. Now let's get into my picks for my top 10 favorite Resident Evil games. Starting off at number 10, I have Code Veronica, or Code Veronica X. Sometimes it's Code Veronica. I'm not sure if they're two separate games, but yeah. This came out in 2000. It started to boost up the Resident Evil series a little bit, going into a different mode, like in a semi-third-person mode. I haven't gotten used to the controls. I just started playing this one, and I'm having fun with it. Though it's certainly not one of my all-time favorites, obviously, since it's at number 10. It's probably one of the ones that I'm going to remember the least. The story, I mean, you don't really play Resident Evil for the story, but the story in here really isn't that much to write home about, though it does have some really memorable moments, and for the most part, I think it's a strong entry in the series. Certainly not a bad game. Coming in at number 9, I have the recent Resident Evil 3 Remake. Resident Evil 3 Remake really wasn't terrible, okay? In fact, I think there was a lot that it got right. Though easily its biggest problem is its length. It did feel a lot more like DLC to Resident Evil 2 Remake than an actual game, and with the added multiplayer system, it really didn't help the game as a whole, but I think there were a lot of really great moments in the third Resident Evil Remake game. It has gorgeous graphics, and the gameplay, it's still solid enough, though it does have a little bit of weird moments. Like, the Nemesis really isn't as intimidating as he was in the original Resident Evil 3, but I'm not going to get into all that. All I can say about Resident Evil 3 is that it's not a bad game. It's solid enough. But, hey, maybe Resident Evil 8 will be better. Let's hope so, because it was really starting to get better when the 7th game came out. At number 8, we have the one that started it all, Resident Evil 1. This has definitely not aged well in the slightest, but hey, you gotta remember, this is what started the series. But sure, I think what people are going to remember the most of this game is its cringeworthy live-action cutscenes and the awful, awful voice acting that people still like quoting today. That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich. Here's a lockpick. I think it might be handy if you, the master of unlocking, would take it with you. Hey, I actually did some video game voice impressions. For once. But anyways, that doesn't mean this is a bad game, okay? It's probably one of the ones that people aren't going to play a lot of nowadays. In fact, I don't think that many people actually play this game nowadays, but hey, it's what started the series, and it's still a fun game. It still has its memorable moments. I mean, it has its memorable characters who returned in later games in the series, but Resident Evil 1 is definitely a flawed game, but hey, it's a great one. Still a great one. At my number 7 spot, I have Resident Evil 3. This was truly what I wouldn't say this is better than the second game. In fact, I haven't played much of this game, but what I can say about this game is that its level design is absolutely terrific. It's one of the best I've seen in the series, and it made me wish they were put, some of it were put in the Resident Evil 3 remake. Also, the Nemesis, what can I say? One of the most memorable Resident Evil villains of all time. Still intimidating, still scary as hell, and you just want to run away from him whenever he comes near. But hey, Resident Evil 3 Nemesis is probably the entry in the series that people are going to remember the least, at least for the PlayStation. But it's certainly a great one. Certainly a great one to end off the trilogy until, of course, the new entries come in. At number 6, I think this is definitely one of the better action-oriented Resident Evil games, Resident Evil Revelations. It came out around the same time as Resident Evil 6 did, and that was a disaster. But I thought this was definitely a lot better. It's definitely one of the weaker sides of this is its use of episodic gameplay. Like it goes from one part, then it goes to another. But I really enjoyed playing as multiple different characters. And it does have some really tense moments, and it's pretty lengthy too, so I think it's definitely a slight improvement over Resident Evil 6. It was released for the 3DS, then it went on to multiple other systems, so yeah, I used to have it for Xbox 360, but I sold it, and now I got the PS4 version. So yeah, this is still a really fun entry. I think it's one of the most underrated in the series. At my number 5 spot, we got the one to completely save the series, and now Resident Evil is back to its horror roots, and let's hope it keeps it that way from now on. Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. Sure, it doesn't have the most memorable main protagonist in the entire series, though you play as him again in the new game that's coming out, but hey, there is still a lot that the 8th game is going for, but we're not going to talk about that till I play that game and I review it. For now, let's talk about Resident Evil 7. Oh my god, I was blown away with how good the graphics were, and the fact that you were playing in a first-person perspective. It really made you feel like you were stuck in there, like especially if you're playing on the PlayStation VR mode. It's truly fantastic. I mean, and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre family reference, it's just one of the most memorable moments in all of Resident Evil. And this game came out in 2017, and it still holds up 4 years later. And those bosses too, like the old baker lady, ugh. It has one of the most memorable boss fights in the entire series, and it's certainly an image that will never escape my mind, but that's what I love most about this game. It truly showed that Capcom can still make this series scary. Let's hope they can prove it again. At my number 4 spot, I have Resident Evil Remake. This is how you make a remake. Improved voice acting, improved cutscenes, improved basically everything. It's a lot darker, it's not as cheesy, and it basically just gets everything right, and it proves that it's, to this day, it's still one of the best video game remakes of all time, even after 20 years. I mean, it really isn't that much to say. I mean, it has 2 different campaigns, just like, you know, the original 1 and 2 had, but both of them, it's kind of like, they're kind of the same, but in different character perspectives. One is easier, one is harder, but yeah. If you were to start off the Resident Evil series, I recommend starting off with this one. It's on multiple different platforms, so it really doesn't matter. I didn't really play the GameCube version since it doesn't really work. I've mostly been playing the Switch version, and it still works great. I have a review for that game on my channel. I have I have a playlist of Resident Evil video game reviews that I made on my channel, so yeah, you can check that out. It's on my channel. At number 3, I have Resident Evil 2, the original. This is how you make a sequel. This is truly how you make a sequel. Improving everything that was just already good about the original Resident Evil and crank it up to 11 with new characters, 2 new badass main protagonists that you play as throughout 2 different campaigns, more monsters, more disturbing imagery. It's just everything I could have wanted from a horror game sequel. And even the look on the N64, it's impressive. It looks really impressive. The fact that it pushes the limits for what the N64 is capable of, and what it looks like on the PS2. Of course, you know, you can still play it on the PS3, the original version. They're actually not closing the PlayStation Store on the PlayStation 3, so yeah, if you haven't played it, play it on the PlayStation 3. Just download it, but yeah. But what can I say about Resident Evil 2? It's one of the best games on the PlayStation original, and yeah, what more can I say? Resident Evil 2 is a masterpiece. What could be better than this? How about a remake to that sequel? Resident Evil 2 Remake. That's right. This improved everything that was great about the original Resident Evil 2 and cranked it up to 11. Because there's one thing the original Resident Evil 2 did not have. Mr. X. I'm telling you, this guy is a show stealer. And if you thought the Nemesis was creepy in the original Resident Evil 3, just wait till you get a load of Mr. X. Like, this is truly the show stealer, and I don't think I talked about him enough in my review of Resident Evil 2 Remake, but what can I say? This is probably the best looking Resident Evil game I've ever seen. Like, I was super impressed with the gore effects when I was playing the demo version, and the look of the game, and, you know, the sound, and the fact that when you buy, like, the DLC, you can, like, combine, when you're playing the levels, you can actually switch it to the original Resident Evil 2 soundtrack. It was just super fantastic, and the costumes, you can have their original costumes. This is, it just shows that Capcom is really showing their love for their original games, like with their remakes. Well, maybe not much with Resident Evil 3, but Resident Evil 2 Remake is a masterpiece, and it's easily my favorite video game remake of all time. And it could have easily taken the top spot if it weren't for the one Resident Evil game that I played the most. Of course, my number one pick is a no-brainer. I mean, this is the game to, like, that people have played the most. Like, this is a Resident Evil game. When people think Resident Evil, they easily think of this game. And it was released for GameCube, and now it's been released for every other platform, including Nintendo Switch. Of course, that is Resident Evil 4. Not only is this the best Resident Evil game, in my opinion, it's also one of my all-time favorite games. I mean, I own this game on multiple different platforms already, and hell, I'll buy it again if it comes to PS5. Because really, I just cannot get enough of this game. I've replayed this game so many times. The gameplay is super fun, and I love how in the perspective as you're playing the game, when you're shooting off against enemies, you basically have to be careful where you shoot, because it's not a run and gun game. Like, it actually manages to be really creative when it comes to the gun mechanic. And there's going to be a VR mode coming to Oculus Quest 2. I only have Oculus Quest 1, but yeah, hey, I'm fine playing with this version, though I don't really play the PS2 version that much anymore. But yeah, Resident Evil 4, there really isn't that much to say about it. I mean, when I think Resident Evil, I think of this one. When I think of the best Resident Evil games out there, Resident Evil 4 easily comes to my mind. I mean, it's aged super well. I mean, with the look of the game, even on PS2, it's actually really impressive. Compared to the other games, this holds up super well. Even for 2005, it's still a masterpiece, and despite some of its issues, I usually tend to forget those. Like, come on, when you're escorting Ashley Graham, you can always put her in a dumpster when there's a dumpster nearby, because that's obviously where she belongs. But hey, Resident Evil 4, it gets almost everything right, and it's one of my all-time favorites, and it's easily my pick for the best Resident Evil game of all time, and I don't think that's ever going to change. So yeah, guys, those are my picks for my top 10 favorite Resident Evil games. Sorry I didn't talk a whole lot about them. I just gave, like, mild, quick thoughts, but this is just a top 10 list. It's not reviews of the game or anything like that, reviews of the games, but yeah. So, who knows, maybe Resident Evil 8 will be somewhere on this list when it comes out. Let's hope so, because I played the demo and it really looks promising. Let's hope it's worth the $60. Let's hope Capcom can really do a lot of justice for this one. I'm really hoping so. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Ward out.